Thanks, Eric. We're here in Mr. Cooke's office to discuss why some of those budget changes were made. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
The recommended budget that you just presented is about $2 million less than the amended budget for the fiscal year that we're currently in. Can you explain to us how we got to that point?
Well, I think it's a combination of good news and bad news. And so on the good news side, Wake County is still growing, so the property tax base is still growing. We'll have more property tax revenue this year than we had last year. But I would have to say that it's going to be much slower than what we've been accustomed to. The tax base will only grow by 0.6%, and when we've been used to growing 5 to 6% a year, that's a big difference. But on the plus side, it's still growing. Sales tax is down. That's not great news. And all the revenues related to building and development, whether it's register of deeds, excise tax, or building permits, all those revenues are down. And so the budget overall is down because of those revenue streams. But what helps us out, and the one big plus on the budget side, is the help that came from the Wake ABC Board. A Wake ABC Board is going to give Wake County $4 million in the upcoming budget, one in an ongoing revenue stream, and then $3 million is a one-time, what we'll call it, a gift from the ABC Board. And I think that represents their generosity and their financial strength, actually. We're very fortunate to have a well-run ABC Board in Wake County.
The budget also reduces the current county workforce by 58 positions. Most of these are vacant. Why are we continuing to reduce positions?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, and we've had to reduce positions over the last 2 years. I think with this 58, I think we'll be up to about 197 positions, which we've had to reduce. Some of that is related to workload. The development is down in Wake County, and so positions that were based on the workload of the development that occurred in Wake County has declined, and so we've had to reduce the workforce in that area. In other areas, we've had to ask departments to cut back and reduce expenditures in a number of areas. We've asked departments to reduce expenditures by 7%, and you can't reduce expenditures in many departments without affecting the workforce and employees. And so some of it relates to reductions that have been put forward by departments. And I'd say finally the third point is, and this is related to human services, if the state or federal government cuts back on revenues, we have decided not to replace those dollars with county dollars. And so some of those reductions in human services on the workforce side, both dollars and people, are because the state has reduced revenues in those areas.
We've just talked about the reductions and some of the downsides of the recommended budget, but there are some upsides as well. Do you want to tell us about some of those?
Oh, sure. I tried to be the optimist in the budget presentation and to at least explain some of the positive aspects that we're going to add while we're still cutting expenditures. A couple of those positive parts of the budget. One is the mental health continuum of care facilities, which will open in the next fiscal year. And so there's several $1 million in the budget to open that facility. We're opening the consolidated animal shelter in, I think it's June or July coming up, so there's a full year operating expense for that. We're opening 2 new EMS stations. We're opening the sheriff's new training facility, or that actually just recently opened. So those things are, I think, positive side of the budget, that we're still a growing community. We still have growing demands in many areas. And so we're able to add those things in the budget. But the only way those got added were from reductions from the departments across the board. And so we had to make the reductions. One reason was we knew that we had to absorb these new costs in the budget as well.
There's also some things that we were fortunately able to maintain in the recommended budget. Did you want to touch on those for a moment?
I think the most noteworthy items in the budget, I think there's 3 that come to mind. One, we maintain the tax rate at the same rate, and I think our board has had the appropriate goal of the last 2 years that will not put our revenue shortfalls on the backs of taxpayers, and so we're balancing the budget without increasing the tax rate. At the same time, school funding stays the same, and I think A lot of school systems around the state would like to say that they got the same amount of money as the prior year, and we're fortunate that in Wake County we can say that. And then, of course, there was a lot of news about the library in Garner, our Southeast Regional Library, and we're able to balance the budget without closing that library, and as well keeping all the libraries open, all the branches open at their current hours of operation.
You and the other staff members spent a lot of time over the last several weeks talking to citizens and commissioners about the process. You also spent some time working with the advisory committees. Can you tell us about that process and what information has been shared with them?
Well, I think over the last 2 years what we've tried to do is be very open and transparent on the changes that we've been making in the budget. And as we talked about at the budget presentation, our budget for the first time in anybody's memory has been going downward. I mean, for years and years the budget went upward, and so it was what would we add to the budget each year. The last 2 years has been a very different conversation. It's what do we need to take away from the budget, what services do we need to reduce, what programs do we need to cut back. And we wanted to do that in a very open and transparent way. And so we worked with the advisory committees, and those are the board-appointed groups that give advice to the Board of Commissioners, and that's our Human Services Board, our Library Commission, Planning Board, Fire Commission. So all those advisory committees we've been spending a lot of time with, talking about what reductions those departments have put forward, identifying which ones we felt were appropriate to take in the upcoming budget, and actually getting their feedback. So I don't think there are any surprises in the budget from the standpoint of the advisory committees, and I think that was a good part of the process to be open in that regard.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to share with us about the recommended budget?
Well, I think again we're at that point where we do like to get the feedback from the citizens and the public, and we'll be having public hearings in June, work sessions on the budget with the Board of Commissioners, and so now it's time for the public to weigh in and provide some feedback about what they think of the budget for the upcoming year.
Thank you again for being with us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
As David was just mentioning, the budget public hearings are coming up on Monday, June 7th at 2 p.m. in the Wake County Courthouse, room 700, and at 7 p.m. at the Wake County Commons building. You can get directions to both of those locations at wakegov.com/budget. You can also email comments to budget@wakegov.com or by leaving a voicemail at the number on your screen.